Hello, and welcome back to another snapshot video? Well, not quite, I'm afraid. We're actually gonna do things a little differently in this video because Mojang, well, let's just say they've been busy. In a pretty big way. I mean, first, they announced a brand new armor trimming system to the game, and then out of nowhere, they decide to let us all know, hey, you know that big thing you've been begging for us to add for like 2 years now? Here, you can have it. We're adding archaeology to the game. And as if that wasn't enough, the following week, they go on to announce that a brand new cherry blossom biome is being added to the game as well for Valentine's Day. And of course, they gave us the sniffer, a new structure, and even a title for the update. So yeah, in a fairly short period of time, the Trails and Tails update has gotten a whole lot bigger. So today, instead of going through each of the snapshots they've released up to this point, I'm gonna focus my attention on one major feature at a time, going through them as thoroughly as possible. And of course, today, our focus is on armor trims. Alright, you know what, I think a good place to start is with a change that I and so many others have been wanting for such a long time now. You know that enchantment glint that you see on all sorts of armor, weapons, and tools, and even other items like potions and enchanted golden apples? Well, those enchantment glints have now been toned down quite a bit. The transparency of the glint has been noticeably reduced, and the glint itself has also been tweaked to be a little slower with a bit more contrast in some of its intervals. The enchantment glint is far less visible now, and overall it's much harder to notice than it was before. It's subtle. And to make this a true sandbox feature, it's also been given its own set of sliders within the accessibility menu, so that we have the ability to adjust both the speed and the transparency of the enchantment glints that appear on our items, like our armor. Which effectively means you could always turn it back up if you happen to like the glint the way it was, or you could turn them all the way down so that they can't be seen at all. But by default, they will be toned down quite a bit. So, why make this change now? Well, to be honest, the enchantment glint always made it pretty difficult to see what was underneath. Netherite armor, for example, looks phenomenal, but as soon as it's been enchanted, much of that color and the detail that makes it stand out becomes almost completely hidden by the glint. Which is really unfortunate because the first thing that we want to do when we get a fancy new set of armor is enchant it. So, I mean, imagine if Mojang decided to say, add even more novelty and more detail to armor in the game. The enchantment glint would just cover it all up. And that, well, that would just be tragic. So I guess it's probably a good thing they decided to make this change sooner than later, because, as you already know, armor trims are being added to Minecraft. Yep, that's right. A brand new armor trimming system is coming to Minecraft. And let me tell you, it is one heck of a new feature. So what are we waiting for? Let's just jump right into it. These new trims come in a wide variety of new patterns and colors that, for now, can be applied to all of your armor, including your helmet, your chestplate, your leggings, and your boots. And when I say variety, believe me, I mean variety. These trims come in 16 different patterns, which you can then dye in up to 10 different colors. Not to mention the fact that there are 6 different base materials that armor itself can be made from. That alone gives us over 900 combinations just for creating a single unique piece of armor. Add to all of that you can mix and match each armor piece for an even further diversified armor set, and just like that, the number of possible combinations you get reaches over 800 billion. Nope, that is not a typo. And for the record, I haven't even included the fact that leather armor itself can be dyed up to 12.3 million different colors. So yeah, I'd say variety is a little bit of an understatement. Now, these armor trims, they're meant to be purely visual, so they don't have any effect on the stats of your armor in really any way. They don't give you any added protection or special enchantments or anything like that, which I personally think is a good thing, and I'll explain why in a moment. Instead, these trims are designed to allow players to visually personalize their armor so they can express themselves in style as individuals when playing this game. And as someone who's been playing Minecraft for over a decade now, I've gotta say, I am really excited for this. Literally for years now, the standard progression of the game would more or less lead most players to a full set of diamond armor. And so if you were playing on a server, you'd eventually get to a point where everyone just looks the same. So these armor trims are meant to finally give players the option they needed to add a bit of unique character to the way they look. And I mean, look at these trims, they look sharp. There are so many good looking designs here that I could see myself using, it's kind of a little overwhelming. And so here's the thing, the reason I think it's a good thing that these trims don't enhance the stats of your armor is because once you have a system where each trim comes with its own unique perk, players will inevitably find a way to min-max that situation. The community will essentially figure out which combinations of trims leads to the quote-unquote best set of armor. That information will make its way around, and before you know it, we'll be right back to where we started, and everyone would just look the same. It would be neat, don't get me wrong, but it wouldn't really solve the problem. The entire point of adding these armor trims to the game is to create a whole new layer of customization to the armor that we all wear throughout most of our gameplay. And really, it would take away from all of that creativity that we would otherwise get from the player base coming up with their own unique designs. And I gotta say, I'm really excited for what all of you guys are gonna come up with. Okay, so here's how it works. To trim your armor, you're gonna have to first go out into the world to hunt down your very first smithing template. This is now actually one of the required ingredients for making any and all upgrades at the smithing table moving forward, arguably making it one of the more essential items that you're gonna need to acquire late in the game now. And these templates, they actually work in a few different ways. First, they're used to define what type of upgrade that you're going to be making to your equipment. And at the moment, there are two different types. The first, of course, is for adding these new trims to your armor. But the second is actually for your Netherite upgrades. Of course it is. And we can actually see this very clearly when we hover over each of the templates. And I just gotta say, I love how this was done. The tooltips here make it so easy to understand what's going on. Seriously, props to Mojang for making this as user-friendly as possible. So when you hover over one of the templates, right at the top, it will show you the type of upgrade that the template is used for. In this case, we can see it's used for the Dune armor trim, which is one of those 16 different trim patterns that I mentioned at the start of the video. And then right below this, we can actually see what type of items are qualified for the upgrade. In this case, it's your armor, as well as what ingredients are meant to be used. And here it says ingots and crystals. And it shows us this for both types of templates. So if we move over to the Netherite upgrade template, we can see right away that this template is a little bit different. It even looks different from the others. So in this case, it clarifies that this upgrade applies to diamond equipment, and that the required ingredient is a Netherite ingot. But let's actually hold on to that thought because we're gonna come back to this template later. Right now, I want to focus in detail on how to actually use these new armor trim templates at the smithing table. So, here we go. An armor trim has two properties, a pattern and a material. The pattern, of course, is what's defined by that smithing template, which effectively is what holds that blueprint for the visual design of the trim, while the material is defined by a specific ingredient that will be used to represent the color of that trim. So to account for this, the smithing table has actually been completely redesigned. It now serves as a whole new kind of workstation for all of your physical equipment upgrades and modifications. And this is where the smithing template is at home. So when we open up the smithing table's GUI, we can see that there are now 3 different slots that we can interact with. And this is compared to the 2 slots that we had previously. And right off the bat, we can see a little icon in the first slot that shows us exactly where our template needs to go. And again, I love how user-friendly this is, because if you didn't know this, let's say you were new to Minecraft and you were using the smithing table for the first time, and you weren't sure how it all works, it will just straight up tell you that you need to put a smithing template here. And notice if we hover over the other 2 slots, there's no indication of what needs to be placed here yet, because it hasn't yet been defined. Basically, the smithing table needs to know what type of template is being used before it can provide further instructions. So once we place our armor trimming template in the first slot, 2 new icons will suddenly appear, showing us that in this case, we need to put a piece of armor in the second slot, and that we need to put either an ingot or a crystal in the third slot, just like the tooltip said. And watch closely, it'll actually shuffle through a number of different icons here to help hint to the player what some of these items might be. The armor component is actually pretty straightforward, so let's go ahead and place a diamond chestplate in to get us started. Then all we need to do is place a gem or an ingot in to decide what color we want our trim to be. And here there are 10 different ingredients we can choose from: iron, copper, gold, lapis, emerald, diamond, netherite, redstone, amethyst, and quartz. And if you noticed, you can actually use the same material for the trim that the armor itself is made from. And it will just add a contrast between those materials to make it stand out. In this case, we were able to add a diamond trim to a diamond chestplate. One of the things I really appreciate here too is that the smithing table actually gives us a preview of the trim before we craft it. This was never available before, even when the smithing table was just used for Netherite upgrades. So we can actually sample different materials to see what each trim looks like before committing to the upgrade, which is great because, at least as of this video, there's no way of going back. And one last thing I'll note here is that once a piece of armor has been modified with a trim, the sprite for the new piece of armor will update as well, to visually indicate that it contains a trim when you're looking at it from your inventory. And when you hover over it, the tooltip also lets you know which specific upgrades have been made to it. In this case, we've added a Dune armor trim using gold material. And this is very helpful because the sprite here for the armor will look the same regardless of which trim that you decide to add. The only thing that does change is the color of the trim based on which material that you used. So if you had several trimmed pieces of armor in your inventory, you'd need to heavily rely on the tooltip here to know the specifics of each upgrade, because otherwise, they all look very similar at a glance. So, now that we know how to craft each of these trims in a smithing table, the major question is, where are each of these smithing templates found? Now, I could just read off of a list, but you know what? I don't think that's why you're watching this video. So instead, why don't we travel to each location and see for ourselves firsthand where each of these templates can be found. This is probably one of my favorite features. These smithing templates can literally be found all over your Minecraft world. Across the overworld, above ground, deep below the surface, and even across dimensions. And initially, to acquire one, you're not going to be able to craft them. They are rare artifacts that can only be initially found in ancient structures scattered across your world. So why don't we begin our journey with one of the very first structures added to the game, the Desert Pyramid. After searching far and wide for a desert in my world, I finally came across our very first destination. The Desert Pyramid is one of the oldest structures in Minecraft. It's been around for almost as long as I've been playing the game, and it's here that lies our very first template. To acquire it, we'll have to make our way down the hidden shaft below the center of the pyramid, where we will find 4 loot chests. And within each of these chests, there is going to be a 14.3% chance of finding not 1, but 2 templates for the Dune Armor Trim. And of course, if you do the math, there are 4 chests, so this means there should be about a 46% chance of finding one at all on your first try. Once we have it, we can add it to our smithing table, throw in a piece of armor that we like, and then add our favorite material for the trim. Wow, it really does look amazing. I went ahead and threw together a few examples here so that you could get a good feel for how the Dune Armor Trim really looks. And the funny thing here is, while I was in the middle of making this video, they actually updated the design here for this trim with a completely new pattern. They updated the sprite here too. So this is what it looks like as of snapshot 23W12A, and the design that it used to have was repurposed somewhere else, which we'll get to see later on. Honestly, all of these trims look so good, I can't decide which one I like the most. I would truly be happy with any one of these. Now, I will say, the Dune template is actually considered to be one of the 4 more common templates, as it will always generate 2 of them together whenever they're found. And there's a pretty good reason for this. Notice how I only have 1 Dune armor template left in my inventory, even though I definitely grabbed 2 out of that chest. That's because smithing templates are completely consumed after each use. Yep, that's right. These extremely valuable artifacts that you have to search far and wide for to acquire can only be used once. And that is why these more common templates come in a pair. Because odds are, a lot of players are not going to know this when they discover one for the first time. So having them come in a pair gives new players a chance to learn, by trial and error, that these smithing templates are indeed consumed when first used. And that way they'll still have a backup that they haven't used yet. But here's the thing. Let's say you wanted 4 of these templates to upgrade a complete armor set. You accidentally used 1 already, and you have 1 left. But you really don't want to go find another pyramid to get 3 more. Well, fortunately, as rare as these artifacts are to initially find, there is a way to duplicate them. So, when you find a smithing template for the first time, hopefully your eye will catch that little notification that pops up when a new recipe is unlocked. Because if we go to our crafting table, we'll see that there's actually a crafting recipe for the smithing template that we just found. But here's the catch. You actually need the smithing template itself to craft more of them, which is why you still need to find one first before you can craft more. And it is an expensive recipe. If we look here, we'll see that it requires 7 diamonds to duplicate that template, along with the template and a specific block that is unique to where you found that template. And in this case, it is a block of sandstone. Therefore, this crafting recipe will be slightly different depending on which template is being duplicated. And our output from all of this is 2 Dune templates, effectively duplicating them. And of course, we can do this really as many times as we need, so long as we have the supply of diamonds. I love this, even though it seems like a pretty expensive recipe, especially early game when diamonds are limited. Later in the game, many players often have the opposite problem. You eventually get to a point where you have a surplus of diamonds. Because all of your equipment has already been upgraded, you may have access to diamond equipment through a villager trading setup, and now you just have a bunch of extra diamonds that you don't know what to do with. So this gives those diamonds a really great purpose. Now, when it comes to the rarity of these templates, Mojang actually mentions that they wanted to create a balance between how difficult it is to find a template versus how expensive it is to craft one. They state here that due to the method of crafting copies of templates, we want the process of discovering another template in a structure to feel like the player has just saved 7 diamonds. If the templates are too rare, this situation does not happen as much, meaning players will not be encouraged to explore more structures. So even though we have the ability to duplicate the template, we still have plenty of reason to continue our search for another desert temple if we wanted more. You have a choice. You can either continue your search for more, or you can go mining for diamonds. The choice is yours. Okay, let's move on to our next destination. We've still got quite the journey ahead of us. Our next stop is located deep within the jungles of Minecraft, in a place that is often very well hidden and can be quite difficult to find. The Jungle Temple. If you're fortunate enough to stumble upon one of these ancient structures, you may just find your second template. To find it, we're gonna need to make our way to the bottom floor of the temple. And here, we will have two opportunities to find a loot chest that has what we are looking for. Shears in hand, we can make our way down a tight corridor, disarm a couple of traps, and then we will find our first chest, where we will have a 1 in 3 chance of finding 2 templates for the Wild Armor Trim. And of course, if we don't find one in this chest, there's always a chance we can find one in the hidden chest located behind the secret piston trap door, bringing our odds to about a 56% chance that we'll find one at all when visiting the Jungle Temple. And once again, we can put it in our smithing table to make ourselves some pretty nice looking armor. I gotta say, it looks pretty sharp. But honestly, who am I kidding? They all look sharp. Remember, this is one of the 4 common smithing templates, so we were lucky enough to get 2 templates out of this find. So then all we need to do is duplicate it twice to acquire enough for a full set of armor. And for this crafting recipe, instead of using a block of sandstone, as we did with the Dune template, we'll have to use a block of mossy cobblestone, which we can easily get right from the temple. Alright, our next stop may be a little bit easier to find, but it certainly will not be easier to get to. The Pillager Outpost should be fairly easy to spot from a distance, but it is heavily guarded by an army of pillagers. If we can successfully fight our way through them, we will hopefully make our way to the top of the tower, where we will find a single chest. And this chest has a 25% chance of having 2 templates for the Sentry Armor Trim. I really like this one. It actually kind of looks like armor that a soldier stationed at an outpost like this could potentially wear. I like it. Now, remember earlier when I said that the Dune armor trim had been given a completely new pattern? Well, this is what its old design used to look like. As of 23W12A, the Dune armor trim's old pattern is now used by the Sentry armor trim. And the sprite for the template was changed a bit as well in order to fit this new pattern. So then, you might be wondering what happened to the old design for the Sentry armor trim. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, if we want to duplicate this trim, the crafting recipe here uses a block of cobblestone, which we can easily grab right from the outpost. Moving ahead to our next destination, we find ourselves slowly approaching a vast ocean. Traveling along the coast or throughout the open sea, we should eventually spot the remains of an abandoned shipwreck. Now, these shipwrecks come in so many different varieties that depending on which kind you find, you'll have different odds of finding a template. Some of the full shipwrecks, whether it's right side up, on its side, or upside down, will have 3 different chests hidden inside. A treasure chest, a map chest, and a supply chest. And all 3 of these chests each have a 16.7% chance of having 2 templates for the Coast Armor Trim, marking the last common armor trim on our list. This means if we're lucky enough to find a full shipwreck, we will have about a 42% chance overall of finding one on our first try. Whereas if we just find the back half of a shipwreck, it will only have 2 chests, giving us about a 31% chance of finding one on our first try. And if you're really unlucky, the front half of a shipwreck only has 1 chest, leaving us with just a 16.7% chance overall. What can I say? They look great. It kind of has this nice and clean simplicity to it. It's very easy on the eyes. I can see this being very popular for anyone who doesn't want a design that feels too busy. Sometimes simple is better. And if we want to duplicate these templates, the crafting recipe also requires a block of cobblestone, which honestly shouldn't be too hard to find. Now it's time to move out into the open sea. From this point forward, each of the armor trims that we seek will be increasingly more and more difficult to find. And what could be more difficult than trying to raid an ocean monument? This next template is going to be a bit more challenging to acquire. Unlike every other structure that we visited so far, the Ocean Monument doesn't have any loot chests. Instead, the templates that we desire are in the hands of, or I guess in the fins of, the 3 Elder Guardians. The Ocean Monument is, of course, quite the maze to get through. But if we are properly prepared, we drink our potion of water breathing and our potion of night vision so that we can see down there, we should be able to make our way through successfully. That is, until we find and slay our first Elder Guardian. And each of these Guardians will have a 20% chance of dropping a single template for the Tide Armor Trim. And unfortunately, just in case you were wondering, having looting on your sword won't affect this percentage. They'll also drop no matter who or what kills them. Since there are 3 of these sea monsters guarding the monument, this means we should have about a 50-50 shot of getting one on our first raid. Fingers crossed. Very cool. These definitely look like something that Guardians of the Sea would wear. I really like this design. We can see very clearly too that the pattern closely resembles prismarine bricks, making this one of the first trims that really reflects the place where we found the template. And I love that. This is probably one of the coolest ways to show off our overworld travels and literally wear our accomplishments on the armor that we've made. And, of course, if we want to duplicate these templates, the crafting recipe here uses a block of prismarine, which we should be able to get in abundance from the Ocean Monument, but only after we've cleared the place of Elder Guardians. Now, if you thought the Ocean Monument was difficult to find, this next structure is going to be a much bigger challenge. Fortunately, our local cartographer should be able to hook us up here, because without a map, this would be a pain to discover on our own. Traveling several thousands of blocks away from spawn, across diverse landscapes, full of massive peaks and valleys, we should eventually find a dark oak forest. And it's here that we will eventually stumble upon our very first woodland mansion. It's probably best you're wearing a full set of armor for this raid, because this place is not a walk in the park. It's fairly dark here, so several monsters will spawn naturally, but it's the illagers that pose the real threat. If we can survive the attack from any of the local Vindicators and Evokers that are in the area, then there should be a number of opportunities to find rooms that have a loot chest in them. Every mansion, though, generates randomly with different types of rooms spread throughout. So some mansions could have nearly a dozen loot chests, while others may only contain a few. And for this reason, because of how rare these places are, there is going to be a 50% chance of finding a single template in each chest for the Vex Armor Trim. So Mojang actually states why they made these templates more common pretty clearly in one of their snapshot articles. They say, woodland mansions already have very few chests that utilize loot tables. In unlucky generations, none at all. It was too rare to find one of these trims, and we want the challenge of getting a Vex Armor Trim to be more about finding a woodland mansion to begin with, which I think is pretty well said. At these rates, you'd have to get pretty unlucky not to find at least one on your first visit. If there were 3 chests in your mansion, for example, you would have an 87.5% chance of finding at least one, which is much higher than the other structures we've seen so far. And it is worth the find. These trims are pretty unique. The helmet has those evil eyebrows that Vexes have, and the rest of the armor looks like it was inspired by the clothes that an evoker wears. Perfect for all of you spellcasters out there. And if you want to duplicate these templates, the crafting recipe uses a block of cobblestone, which we should be able to find right here from the structure of the mansion. And now, it is time for us to visit a structure that is completely new to the game. Unlike every structure that we've been to so far, this next destination is one that we will need to dig up out of the earth. Finding it, though, may be a difficult task, as most of it will be buried beneath the ground. But when we finally do, we will not be disappointed. The structures we're looking for, of course, are known as the Trail Ruins. These buried ruins are the first structures being added to the game that are specifically designed to act as archaeological dig sites, adding to the ever-expanding list of archaeology features coming to the Trails and Tails update. Archaeology, though, is a massive feature that deserves its own video. So for now, we're just going to keep our focus on some of the key loot that we're here to excavate. And then we'll revisit these structures later in another video. To uncover these ruins, we're gonna have to do quite a bit of digging. And we're gonna have to do it very carefully, because there are 2 new types of blocks that we don't want to accidentally destroy. Here, we will find suspicious gravel generating all throughout the trail ruins. And with our newly added brush, which we can craft with a stick, a copper ingot, and a feather, we can brush away these suspicious blocks to find an assortment of random loot. But of that loot, there's really only one thing we're currently here for, and that is to find all 4 of the new smithing templates that are exclusive to these ruins. So, if we carefully dig our way through each of these structures, removing any blocks that may be in our way, we should have about a 1.8% chance of eventually uncovering each of the 4 armor templates for the Wayfinder Armor Trim, the Razor Armor Trim, the Shaper Armor Trim, and the Host Armor Trim. What an incredible reveal. I don't think any of us were expecting to see even more armor trims added to the game like this. It really was a complete surprise, and these trims look amazing. I want to focus for just a moment though on the Shaper armor trim, because this is the design that used to be the trim pattern for the Sentry armor trim. So basically, here's what happened in snapshot 23W12A. The Dune armor trim was given a brand new pattern, and its old design was adopted by the Sentry armor trim. Meanwhile, of course, the old Sentry armor design needed a new home, so it was adopted by the new Shaper armor trim. So that brings everything together very nicely, and now we have 4 new beautifully designed armor trims that we can find all in one place, buried just beneath the surface within the ruins of a long lost culture. And that is something I am very much looking forward to. And as always, if we want to duplicate any of these 4 templates, all we need is a block of terracotta, which is very fitting, considering these structures are pretty much made of the stuff. And that is the last set of templates we're gonna find above ground. To continue our journey, our next destination will be taking us deep below the surface, where no sane person would ever dare step foot. Through lush caves, open caverns, and into the deepest, darkest depths of our world. The deep dark is not a pleasant place to be, yet it is here, in an ancient structure long forgotten by the past, that our next trophy lies. Nestled deep within these dark and eerie caverns, we will find an ancient city. This place is completely void of life, but we still need to be very quiet as we pass through, for there is a warden that patrols these ruins. I'll try my best not to wake him. As we make our way down many of these long, stretching corridors, we're looking for various ruins that can contain anywhere between 1 or 2 loot chests. These ruins come in several different forms, and they are scattered all throughout the ancient city, so there should be more than enough chests for us to find. But because these chests are so plenty here, there's only going to be a 5% chance that a chest will contain a smithing template for the Ward armor trim. I gotta say, I really love this design. It might be one of my favorites so far. It feels like it has so much character to it, and of course it has the warden's face on the front of the chest plate, which I personally think looks really cool. Now, a 5% chance are the lowest odds we've faced yet, but if we could find, say, 10 chests here without being caught by the warden, that would increase our odds of finding one overall to about a 40% chance on our first visit, which honestly isn't too bad. It could be a lot worse. And so I've got a feeling once you find your first template, you're probably not coming back. So to duplicate it, the crafting recipe for the Ward armor trim will use a block of cobbled deep slate. Now, when I said it could be worse, I wasn't joking. Because there is yet one more armor trim that can be found down here, and it is not easy to find. Likely to be one of the most sought after trims in the game, we will only have a 1.25% chance of finding a template for This is definitely, by far, the most interesting of all the trims we've seen yet. Mainly because it's essentially the inverse of what we would expect from a trim. Every other trim that we'll see in this video only covers a small percentage of the armor, meaning we can clearly see that the armor is made out of one material, while the trim is clearly made of another. They're very easy to distinguish. The silence armor trim, though, is the other way around. The trim here actually covers a greater percentage of the armor than the armor itself, creating this illusion that the armor is the trim and the trim is the armor. And honestly, this has some of the coolest implications. I mean, for example, we currently don't have the ability to craft armor made of materials like copper, emerald, lapis, redstone, amethyst, or quartz. And yet, when we've applied those materials to the silence trim, it creates this illusion that the armor itself is made of these materials. And that is such an interesting concept that I really was not anticipating from this update. So it's for this reason I can only imagine that the silence armor trim will probably end up being one of the most coveted trims in the game. And of course, once we get our hands on it, we most definitely want to make sure we duplicate it right away. Make as many backups as possible. And we can do that with a block of cobbled deep slate. Okay, so now if only I could... Oh no. Okay, you know what? It's time to leave. We gotta go. We got what we were looking for and we need to leave. Whew. Alright, I think we're in the clear now. And you know what? While we're down here, there is one more template that just so happens to be nearby. Here, let me grab a few Eyes of Ender and see which direction it is in. Okay, perfect. It looks like it's over in this direction. And here we are. We have just entered one of the most important structures in the game, a stronghold. These maze-like fortresses are often pretty far away from spawn, about a couple thousand blocks or so, and they can be fairly difficult to navigate once you're inside. Currently, we're looking for two different kinds of chests here. First, in every stronghold, there can be anywhere between 0 to 4 corridors containing an altar chest. And these chests now have a 10% chance of containing a smithing template for the eye armor trim. Now, if you're unlucky and you don't find any in one of these chests, the second place you can look is in one of the libraries. There can be anywhere between 0 to 2 libraries per stronghold, so hopefully there will be at least one present. Because, unlike every other loot chest that we've looked at so far, one eye armor trim is now guaranteed in every chest found in a stronghold library, so that even in the most unlucky worlds, this armor trim can hopefully still be found. And some of the libraries contain 2 chests, so you could even potentially find 4 templates in one stronghold if you were really lucky. Very cool. I love the design of this one. The eye on the front of the chest plate is really neat looking, which is obviously inspired by the Eyes of Ender that helped get us here. It's nice. It's very different from some of the other designs we've seen so far. Now, this is actually pretty interesting. If we want the ability to duplicate the eye armor trim, the material that we need to do so is actually nowhere to be found in the overworld. We need a block of endstone for this crafting recipe, which means we're gonna have to continue our journey into another dimension if we want to make more of these. And as it just so happens, that is also where our next template can be found. The portal located at the end of this stronghold will act as our gateway to the end dimension. And we'll need to go through it if we want to try our chances of getting this next trim. Filling in the portal frame with our remaining Eyes of Ender should activate it. Okay, here goes nothing. Alright, so the dragon that stands guard here was only our first obstacle to deal with. So with it out of our way, we should now have free passage to the outer lands of the end. These gateway portals generate here in the end once the dragon has been defeated, and going through one will teleport us out onto one of the many floating islands floating above the void. From here, we have a long trek ahead of us. It could take several miles before finding what we're looking for, but if we keep our eyes peeled, we should be able to spot one on the horizon. And there it is, our very first end city. These castle-like structures are pretty heavily guarded by often dozens of garbling shulker creatures. So be careful. The city is made up of a sprawling complex of interconnected towers and pathways branching off from a central tower. But if you're unlucky, they can sometimes generate just as a single tower by themselves. Our goal here is to make our way to the top of one of these towers, where we should eventually find a pretty good handful of loot chests, each of which will have a 1 in 15 chance of having a template for the Spire Armor Trim. Very cool looking. It kind of looks like the design may have been influenced by some elements of the shulkers, and the checkerboard pattern it has going makes it look very official. It looks nice. Now, I should mention, if you don't find a template in one of these towers, there are 2 additional chests that you can find in a nearby floating ship, if it generates, that is, right next to the elytra, the best loot of all. And finally, if we want to duplicate these templates for the Spire trim, we'll need to use a block of purpur for the crafting recipe, which we can easily get right from the end city. Also, that reminds me, while we're here, we can also grab ourselves a good supply of endstone, so we can readily duplicate the eye armor trim that we got from the stronghold. And on that note, it is best time we leave this dimension and continue our journey in pursuit of entering another. I, of course, am talking about the Nether. The remaining smithing templates on our list lie behind this portal. We've got quite the challenge ahead of us. So, all we need to do now is fix it up, throw on a piece of gold armor to keep us in good standing with the piglins, and then we can activate it. Let's go. Okay, so the first structure we're looking for can sometimes be difficult to find. We're on the lookout for a large, towering structure made up of dark red nether bricks and supported by pillars that hold up a sprawling complex of bridges, corridors and fortified outposts. We can usually find them erected high above the lava oceans that fill most of this dimension. And there it is. We have just arrived at the Nether Fortress. There are many reasons to come here, the first of which is to gather blaze powder to open up the end portal. But we've already done that. We are here to look for something else. Along many of these corridors, there are entire sections of the fortress that contain loot chests. And within these chests, we will have a 1 in 15 chance of finding a template for the Rib Armor Trim. Whoa, this trim is probably one of the more ominous trims we've seen so far. It clearly takes a lot of its inspiration from the wither skeletons that roam these halls, but I could definitely see it being used in a lot of unique ways. A tiger stripe pattern is just one idea. Very cool. Unfortunately, you should be able to find a good handful of chests here, so if you could find, say, 6 chests, that would give you about a 34% chance of finding at least one template in your first fortress. And once we find one, we can duplicate it using a block of netherrack. And finally, we have one final stop to wrap up our adventure. I know we've been to some pretty dangerous places already, but in my opinion, if you're not prepared, this last place is by far one of the hardest structures to conquer. I'm talking, of course, about the Bastion Remnant. These ruins are home to some of the most dangerous threats in the game. The Piglin Brute, wielding an axe made of gold, can take out a well-armored player in just a couple of hits. So if you get cornered by one of these guys, it is game over, man. This means we're gonna have to be very careful as we traverse the labyrinth of narrow passages that make up much of these colossal structures. Now, there are 4 different variants of Bastion Remnants that we can find, each of which has a unique set of structures and loot. This includes the Treasure Room Bastion, the Bridge Bastion, the Housing Unit Bastion, and the Hoglin Stables Bastion. Fortunately for us though, no matter which of these remnants we find, all of the chests that we can come across will each have an 8.3% chance of having a template for the Snout Armor Trim. Dang, these trims are really neat looking. If you couldn't tell, the design very closely resembles the look of a piglin, with its ears on the helmet and its hooves on the boots. Wearing this in the nether would help you fit right in. These bastions usually have a pretty good amount of chests in them as well, so if you were able to find at least 6, you'd have about a 41% chance of finding at least one. And of course, to duplicate them, all we need for our crafting recipe is a block of blackstone, which we can get in abundance right from the bastion. And that is every last one of the armor trimming templates coming to Minecraft in the Trails and Tails update. But there is still one last template we have yet to find, and it can also be found right here in one of these Bastion Remnants. I'm talking, of course, about the smithing template for Netherite Upgrades. That's right, from this point forward, a Netherite Upgrade smithing template is going to be required to upgrade any of your diamond equipment to Netherite. Which is kinda crazy. This completely changes the progression of the game. This effectively means that if you want to make that leap from diamond to netherite, not only will you have to go mining for the very rare netherite scrap buried deep below the surface of the nether, but you will also need to traverse one of the most difficult structures in the game to find one of these templates. That's rough. But you know what? I actually really like this change, and for many of the same reasons that Mojang made these changes to begin with. So they list 3 different reasons for why this change was made in their initial snapshot. First, they wanted to increase the amount of time that players utilize diamond equipment before they upgraded. And second, they wanted to make getting netherite feel like a more significant achievement in the game's progression. And I think this is a really smart idea. Many players probably would have just avoided Bastion remnants before. They may have seen no reason to risk their lives for a pigstep music disc or a Snout banner pattern, as cool as those things are. But now, there's no way of avoiding this place. If you want better equipment, you're gonna have to take on the challenge of conquering at least 1 Bastion remnant, maybe even more if you're unlucky. Now, the third reason they give for making this change has to do with finding a way to organically adapt netherite more naturally into the new smithing table's design. And if I'm being honest, this is probably the main reason for making this change. Adding the new smithing template slot to the table sets an entire precedent for how the smithing table will be used in the foreseeable future. It implies that any upgrades that will be made now or in the future will need a blueprint first that comes in the form of these templates. And so this has to include netherite upgrades, since that's what the smithing table was initially designed for in the first place. It wouldn't really make sense any other way. So, much like the template for the Snout armor trim, the netherite upgrade template can also be found randomly in any of the chests throughout each of the 4 different Bastion remnants. But here's the catch. For most of the chests, there will be a 10% chance of finding at least one. Okay, not too bad. But within the treasure chests, found exclusively in the treasure Bastion remnants, there will be a 100% chance of finding one. And in the changelog, it actually says that there is a guarantee of finding 2 in every treasure room Bastion remnant as a whole. But I'm not actually sure how that works because some of these treasure rooms only have 1 chest in them. But either way, you should be guaranteed at least 1 in this case, which is really all you need. Which brings me to the last point I want to make here. There's actually one more layer to all of this that will make upgrading to netherite even more of a challenge than it was before. If you wanted to upgrade every piece of armor, tool, and weapon that you have in the game, you would need 9 netherite ingots and 9 templates. So let's say that you're lucky enough to find 1 template on your first visit to a bastion. Finding 8 more would be a nightmare, right? So you go to your crafting table to duplicate them, and you remember you need 7 diamonds for each duplication. This means to upgrade everything you have, you would need 9 netherite ingots, at least 1 template from your first bastion raid, and 56 diamonds to turn that template into 9 templates. And that's not including the diamonds that you needed to make all of that equipment to begin with, bringing the total to 91 diamonds. That is crazy expensive. But hey, you know what? At least it gives us something to do with all those extra diamonds that we tend to have late in the game. And that is a wrap. This was such a fun video to make. The exploration piece of this update is easily one of my favorite things about all of this. There are so many new incentives being added to the game to encourage players to explore their world in depth, and I love it. And I can't think of a better way to incentivize travel than adding these very attractive armor trims to the game. Overall, the patterns for these trims were beautifully designed, and the entire overhaul of the smithing table that make all of this possible is one that I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on once this update comes out. Mojang has really outdone themselves this time. The only thing I'd really like to see now is the ability to add similar upgrades to our tools and our weapons. Maybe even to the elytra. I mean, how cool would that be? But who knows? Maybe they have plans for that in the future. One can hope. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I cannot begin to express how much I appreciate you being here. As you can probably imagine, producing videos like this, it takes a long time to make. And if I had the time, I would love to make videos like this on a more regular basis. So if you got any value at all out of this video, and you'd like me to continue making more content like this, do me 2 favors. Hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe. And with that, I will see you next time.